In the middle of the 1300s, people could fall asleep perfectly fine and wake up already dying. A violent fever would hit out of nowhere. Dark, painful lumps swelled beneath the arms and along the neck. And within days, sometimes within hours, entire households vanished. Church bells rang so often that many towns stopped trying to keep track of the dead. Cemeteries overflowed. The streets went quiet. And across Europe, one terrifying thought spread like wildfire. Was this the end? What they didn't understand was that they were living through the most lethal pandemic in recorded history, one that would wipe out up to half of Europe and permanently alter the course of civilization. This was the Black Death. And once it took hold, there was no running from it. To grasp the scale of what came next, you first have to understand what the world looked like just before it collapsed. The early 14th century wasn't the grim, stagnant age people often imagine. It was the peak of the High Middle Ages, a time of stability, booming population, and deepening connection between regions, more interconnected than Europe had been since the Roman Empire. Thanks to warmer climate conditions, known as the medieval warm period, harvests had been abundant for generations. Europe's population had almost doubled in just 2 centuries. Cities expanded beyond their old Roman limits. Paris, Florence, Venice, and London surged with life, crowded, loud, and overflowing with people. Gothic cathedrals rose into the sky, proof of both religious confidence and growing technical power. More importantly, the world was linked together. A trader in Venice could purchase silk that had traveled across all of Asia without him ever leaving home, moved through trade routes protected by the Mongol Empire, the Pax Mongolica. This vast system, like a medieval version of the internet, moved spices, gold, knowledge, and technology faster than ever before. It was a thriving, hopeful world. But that same connection carried a hidden danger. The caravans and ships that brought prosperity were about to deliver catastrophe. The pathways for disaster were already built, and this society, seemingly strong, was about to face something it couldn't see, couldn't understand, and couldn't fight. The source of the coming nightmare was thousands of miles away from Europe's stone streets. Out on the windswept plains of Central Asia, likely around modern Kyrgyzstan or northern China. A land of extremes, endless grasslands, brutal winters, scorching summers. Here lived an ancient killer that had existed for ages. Yersinia Pestis. This bacterium was terrifyingly efficient. It lived among burrowing rodents, marmots, and ground squirrels, embedded in the ecology of the steppes for centuries, far from major human settlements. But in the 1330s, something shifted. Climate historians point to environmental stress, perhaps a harsh drought followed by flooding rains that damaged food supplies and destabilized rodent populations. Hungry and desperate, infected animals moved toward human areas, carrying fleas with them. The jump from animals to humans likely happened in trading posts along the Silk Road. The earliest victims probably had no idea what was overtaking them. Their fevers spiked. They vomited. And then came the most horrifying sign: swollen, agonizing lymph nodes, the buboes that gave the plague its name. In a world where official news moved slowly, fear still outran caravans. By the early 1340s, fractured rumors began reaching Mediterranean ports. Merchants whispered of entire regions collapsing in the east, of pestilence so severe it emptied India, Tartary, Mesopotamia. Europeans listened with dread, but also distance, imagining these horrors as faraway punishments in strange lands. They knew nothing of germs. They didn't realize that the same trade routes delivering their spices were also carrying their executioner. Where would the plague strike first? And who would unknowingly open the door? The turning point, geographically and historically, was the Crimean Peninsula, where the wealthy fortified city of Caffa stood. More than a settlement, Caffa was a powerful Genoese colony, a vital gateway connecting overland Asian trade to Mediterranean shipping lanes. Inside its thick stone walls lived a mix of Italians, Armenians, and traders from across the world, protected by Genoese soldiers and crossbowmen. Then, in 1346, Caffa was besieged. The Golden Horde, led by Khan Jani Beg, surrounded the city. The Genoese were experts in defense and naval resupply, so the siege stretched on, months of stalemate and brutality. But something worse than arrows and siege began killing the attackers. Plague swept through the Mongol camps. Cramped living, poor sanitation, and constant movement turned the army into a perfect incubator. Soldiers began dying in enormous numbers, their bodies darkening with gangrene before death. The horde was collapsing, not from battle, but from biology. Facing ruin, Jani Beg made a choice so horrific it would echo through history. In an early act of biological and psychological warfare, he ordered the bodies of infected soldiers loaded into trebuchets. Soon, corpses were flying over the walls of Caffa. For days, the city was hit by a rain of death. The defenders watched in horror as diseased bodies smashed onto rooftops and into marketplaces. Terror spread instantly, and the infection followed. Fleas abandoned the cooling corpses in search of warmer hosts. The bacteria slipped into the city. The fortress hadn't been breached from outside, but from within. Caffa panicked. Realizing the city was doomed, Genoese merchants used their one advantage: the sea. A dozen galleys filled with refugees, cargo, and unseen passengers, rats and fleas, escaped the harbor and fled toward home. They passed through the Bosphorus near Constantinople, which soon suffered devastation as well, and entered the Mediterranean, the economic bloodstream of Europe. Those ships became floating weapons. Each time they docked to resupply, they unknowingly planted the infection in a new city. The first major European port to fall was Messina in Sicily. When the Genoese ships arrived, the dock workers who went out to greet them encountered something nightmarish. chroniclers recorded decks filled with rotting bodies. The survivors were delirious, writhing in agony, covered in black swellings. What happens when a society faces the unknown? Could human decisions still change the outcome? Messina's authorities tried to react. They expelled the ships, but it was already too late. The real carriers, rats hidden in the ships and fleas clinging to them, had already crossed into the city via ropes and docks. Messina became Europe's first test, and it failed instantly. The plague spread with shocking speed. The tight living conditions of medieval port cities acted like fuel. Within weeks, the social structure collapsed. People fled into the countryside, believing distance meant safety, only to carry the disease deeper into the island. As news of the great pestilence spread, other ports tried to shut their harbors to ships arriving from the east. But medieval quarantine was fragile and inconsistent. Profit often defeated caution. A ship loaded with valuable goods could frequently buy entry. By early 1348, Europe's great maritime powers were collapsing. Genoa was devastated. Venice faced the possibility of extinction. The Venetians, hard-nosed and practical, eventually created one of history's first organized quarantine systems, the Lazzaretto, islands where crews were held for 40 days before entering the city. It was groundbreaking public health, but for the first wave, it came too late. Venice's gondolas turned into funeral boats, drifting through silent canals stacked with corpses. From Italy, the plague moved outward, west to Marseille, across the Adriatic to Dubrovnik. The coastline was breached. Now it pushed inland, following rivers like the Rhone and traveling along old Roman roads. The plague reached the densely populated heart of Europe. Great cities, Paris, Florence, London, Barcelona, were walled and cramped, packed with narrow lanes, tall wooden buildings that blocked sunlight, and open filth running through streets. They were rich, vibrant centers of life, but from a hygiene standpoint, they were disaster waiting to happen. And when the plague hit a major city, it didn't just kill citizens. It shut the city down, like a living organism losing its heartbeat. To understand the terror, you have to imagine facing this without modern science. The most educated minds of the 14th century were lost. Doctors at the University of Paris couldn't explain it. Their world wasn't germ theory, it was humors and corrupted air. Many believed the atmosphere itself had been poisoned, possibly triggered by planetary alignments in 1345 that released toxic vapors. Doctors told people not to bathe, fearing open pores would allow bad air inside. They burned herbs like rosemary and juniper to fight the stench of death. They bled patients already weakened. They lanced buboes, often making infections spread faster. Every solution seemed to worsen the outcome. And the deeper horror wasn't just physical, it was psychological. The realization that knowledge and prayers were helpless shattered people's minds. In Florence, writer Giovanni Boccaccio documented scenes of social collapse so severe they still feel unreal. Fear of contagion broke the most sacred human bonds. Wives left husbands. Fathers abandoned sons. In a small house near the docks, a mother noticed her son wasn't waking up. If the person you loved most began to cough, what would you do? The sick were sealed inside their homes. The mechanics of civilization simply stopped. Laws became meaningless. Courts closed. Bakers quit baking. The daily noise of city life disappeared, replaced by a crushing silence, punctured only by church bells, until even the bell ringers died, or authorities banned them to reduce panic. Bodies piled up faster than anyone could bury them. Churchyards filled. So cities dug mass pits, trenches where the dead were stacked in layers like lumber and covered with thin soil. In the medieval mind, the physical world and spiritual world weren't separate. A catastrophe this vast could only be interpreted as direct divine punishment. God striking humanity for greed, arrogance, and corruption. The church, the foundation of life, faced a crisis it couldn't survive cleanly. People crowded cathedrals, prayed desperately, marched in processions, ironically spreading the pneumonic, airborne form of the disease even faster. As prayers failed and priests died alongside sinners, extreme movements emerged. The flagellants swept through northern Europe, bands of men marching from town to town, whipping themselves in public twice a day with spiked scourges, bleeding as penance in hopes of calming God's wrath. Wherever they went, hysteria followed. But as the death toll rose, society demanded a target to blame. If God wasn't answering, people concluded the devil must be acting. A brutal conspiracy spread, especially across the Holy Roman Empire and parts of Spain, that Jewish communities were poisoning Christian wells to destroy the faithful. Pope Clement VI condemned these claims and pointed out the obvious. Jews were dying too. But panic doesn't listen to reason. Fueled by long-standing anti-Semitism and the desperate need for a culprit, violent pogroms erupted. Entire Jewish communities were burned alive in cities like Strasbourg, Mainz, and Cologne. Mass murder driven by fear and hate. The Black Death didn't only release disease, it exposed humanity at its darkest. And it wasn't only an urban tragedy. While cities were epicenters, most Europeans lived in rural areas. The plague traveled there too, carried by refugees, travelers, peddlers. The countryside died more slowly, but the long-term damage may have been even greater. Thousands of villages vanished completely, their names erased from history. The manorial economy depended on constant labor. With peasants dead, the system broke. Chronicles described eerie landscapes, crops rotting in fields untouched. livestock wandering without owners, wolves moving closer to settlements. The medieval world, carefully controlled for centuries, was being swallowed by wilderness. By 1350, the plague reached the far north, Scotland, Scandinavia, even Greenland, delivering a fatal blow to Norse colonies there. It had scorched the continent from the Mediterranean to the frozen edge of Europe. Then, around 1351, the first catastrophic wave began to burn out. Not because humanity won, but because the bacteria ran out of easy victims. As the fog lifted, Europe looked the same, but was fundamentally changed. The exact death toll will never be fully known, but historians estimate 75 to 200 million deaths across Eurasia and North Africa. In Europe alone, possibly half the population died within 5 years. The survivors entered a world of economic chaos and inflation, but something unexpected followed. Labor became rare. For the first time in centuries, peasants gained leverage. Lords needed workers and were forced to offer higher wages and better conditions. Serfdom cracked, and in many regions eventually broke. Out of catastrophe rose what some call the golden age of the laborer. But psychologically, the trauma remained. Art turned toward death. The danse macabre, skeletons leading kings, popes, and peasants to the grave, became a dominant theme, reminding everyone that death made no exceptions. The Black Death was the greatest trauma Western civilization had ever experienced. It shattered the optimism of the High Middle Ages and revealed how fragile human systems truly were against nature. And in the end, the path of death carved across Europe cleared space for the slow, painful emergence of the modern world. For centuries, this plague was treated like a distant medieval nightmare. But empty streets, locked homes, fear of the air itself, does that really feel ancient? Or does it feel disturbingly familiar? The plague was a stress test of civilization, and history has a habit of repeating its tests. Thank you for journeying through this dark chapter of our past with us. If you believe history deserves to be seen this way, please subscribe and like this video. Your support makes this possible. Immersive history places you inside the moments that shaped our world. We strive to bring the past back to life through cinematic storytelling and total visual immersion, recreating what was lost so we can better understand the present. If you like this video, you would certainly like our next documentary about the dark age of witch persecution. Click here to find out what happens when the witch hysteria spirals out of control and when a rumor can cost you your life. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the next video.